Hey, good morning everyone. So today we're gonna get back on the car. We are right here. We have to get the engine aligned, raise up the mount, bolt the cross member back up. I went and rented the tool at O'Reilly's for reinstalling the harmonic balancer. I'm gonna do that real quick now that everything's buttoned up on the pan, torqued up, front covers torqued up, valve covers, everything's back together. I'm going to install harmonic balancer, get the engine all back in place, start installing the intake manifold, the front accessories, the rest of the spark plugs, the exhaust manifolds, get the drive shaft back in. I've already got the coolant lines connected back here on the transmission. We're going to connect the fuel line to the intake manifold. We're going to get everything. We're going to do as much as we can today on this. I went ahead and dropped the new wheels off at Firestone. They're going to order me some Firehawk tires for the front of it. They're going to be a little smaller. They're going to be 195 55s is what it is. It's going to be a little bit narrower than this 205 that's on this S80 wheel. So let's see how far we can get today, and we may be able to even test fit the radiator. All right, so I got the harmonic balancer back on and a brand new bolt, which was about $7. In order to get it on, I had to run by AutoZone and rent this tool, which is the long reach harmonic balancer pulley installer. It's just a long M16 by 2 here with whatever that coarse thread is with the bearing and the nut. And I had to use a 32mm socket to run it on, and then maybe about a 1/4 inch before the end I had to put the bolt in and actually use the bolt to run it the rest of the way in with the impact. So on to the next thing. The steering rack is back in place. The engine mounts are tight. The transmission mount is tight. I have the passenger side header back on. The driver's side needs some work. So you can see I've been beating on it a little bit with a hammer. The steering rack touches right there on that side. I got the driver's side header on. It is slightly touching. I'm hoping I don't regret that. It turns fine. It's just barely touching. Hopefully it'll make its own clearance. Water pump is installed. New gaskets, new thermostat. That's an AC Delco pump. And I reused the water filler neck. Power steering pump. These lines here both get in the way of my manifold, but I was reading that you reuse I think the factory line. So right now the factory line is kind of seized up on the old motor. I've got it soaking in some WD-40, but I'm going to remove this line and see what I need to do with this. I'm not sure what happens here, but anyways, I'll figure that out in a little bit. What else have I not shown? Transmission dipstick, it's installed. I drilled riv nuts and fastened it to the firewall. Knock sensor harness installed. About to start feeding the Holly harness through this hole, and then the factory AC holes, I'm gonna get some grommets and plug those up. I'll run to town later. I'll probably grab some radiator hose to go from here and here to here and here for the core. I'm going to go ahead and run the harness through, connect to the knock sensors. That I think that's an old pressure sensor, and I'm not sure what the other one is, but I know my reluctor wheel's on the side. Anyways, going to get the harness in, get the intake manifold on. I still need to put the drive shaft in, so more to come. All right, so we just had a learning lesson. One thing I thought I read all the way through this book, but I noticed that my sensor plug for the oil did not plug into the oil pressure sensor. Even though it's similarly shaped, there's different shape inside. I mean, there's little markings and notches and whatnot. So I looked in the book. It says oil pressure sensor may need Holley part 554102. I looked on a Facebook group, Holley Terminator X, that I'm a part of. There is an alternative. Rather than buying this $150 sensor, which kind of sucks because I have to have a sensor that will work with a proper instrumentation. There's a company called Low Dollar. I got a sensor from them, which is 1/8 NPT to this I think it was M12 or M16. Yeah, M16. Same actually thread as the crank bolt. I got that sensor for them, an adapter, and paid for 1-day business delivery, which was like $50. So I'm going to see if I could still reach that sensor with the intake manifold on. If I can, I'm going to progress to putting that intake manifold on. If not, I'm kind of stuck and I will have to wait for the sensor before I can put on the intake manifold. Hey everyone. It's time for an update. I was able to find this little hose here. Dipstick is installed. Header is installed. Plug wires and boots are installed. And starter is installed. Now I went ahead and ran some, I used to do a lot of car audio competitions. I've got some New Concepts 1/0 wire. This is a copper. It's a tinned copper. I've got a 1/0 home run to the back. And then I prepped earlier a piece of 4 gauge. This will jump off the starter, come underneath and up and around to the alternator. So I've got that piece of wire ready for whenever that time comes. I still haven't decided, honestly, on the power steering pump, which is down there. Also, I want to bypass the coolant line that would normally go to the to the throttle body and heat that up. We're going to bypass that. We're going to need to run that to somewhere. Maybe the open port on the radiator. That's where it runs on the GM trucks, in the middle. So one thing we're going to do, I went ahead and pulled this plug out right here. This plug goes from the oil pump back to the filter. We're going to pre-fill that galley with oil back to the filter, then plug it back up. Then I'm going to go ahead and add oil to the engine. Then I'm going to go ahead and add oil, transmission fluid, and see what it'll take. And that'll probably be it for tonight. Tomorrow I'll figure out what I'm going to do with this power steering pump. Go ahead and install that bracket, the alternator, run wires for the alternator inside. Go ahead and connect the power cable for the alternator. And probably try to get the front core support on, radiator, get any kind of modification I need done to the radiator or the core support done. Hook up the transmission harness and just keep going from there. I'll show these when they come back Thursday, but I took some 45s and 90s and straight pieces and made a turn down under each side and drilled a hole for the O2 bung. And I handed it off to a guy that I know at O'Reilly's. He's going to welding school, so he has access to a TIG welder and a really nice MIG welder and all this. And letting him do it gives him some experience. He's going to have a teacher with him, so hopefully it comes out decent or better than what I would do, and it gets that monkey off my back for now and lets me work on something else since I'm running so tight on time. I may cover something I've already shown. Let's see, I put in a catch can. These just run to the top of the intake manifold and then the PCV valve on the valve cover. It's just an interruption. So instead of all the oil puddling in here, it'll build up here, show in the sight glass, and you can drain it. I did get the hose off of the 240 engine. This is supposedly going to thread directly into here, but I think this hose is still in my way. I think that hose kind of hangs out right here, so I may have to bend that thing out or cut it or do something. I just hate cutting that off. That should be a low pressure return. That should be the high pressure line. I have a flex hose for the intake. What am I saying? A flex radiator hose for the top of the radiator. It's not going to reach, or it shouldn't. And my idea is going to be just take a second one of these with a coupling, extend it onto it, place it where I need. I have another one for the lower hose. I think I've already showed all the starter and stuff is in there. I'm waiting on the pressure sensor still. Got the car jacked up. I had to install the V-band clamp on the tank inlet there. That was a freaking nightmare. That was whoever decided the bolt length on that has lost their freaking mind. Maybe it should have just been installed prior to installing the tank, but I ended up taking the factory clamp, drilling out the threads, running a 1/4 through it, a long 1/4 with a nut, and tighten up that way. I did tighten up the 1/2-inch line. Drive shaft reinstalled. I have the shifter temporarily routed in, installed. I have the harness installed, and I just kind of ran them up through. I ran both up through the shifter hole for right now. What else do we have to hook up? I've got to put the front clip back on, install the radiator, hook up the hoses. We're gonna tee this into the overflow tank. Hopefully that doesn't cause a problem between the radiator and overflow. I got the overflow back in. That's going to go to the filler. And then what? We're waiting on the pressure sensor. Then we can hook up these two hoses. I can go ahead and hook up the alternator cable, run that wire in, and see about getting the battery in the back and hooking up wiring. I need to go through and isolate any of these open connectors, all these bad broken connectors that were rotted. I need to isolate this stuff before I hook up to the supply. I need to find out where, I need to see where the battery hooked up to all this at, because I need to tie there for the chassis harness. Anyways, I'll figure that out. Get a lot of this fixed up where the dogs chewed it off. And then it won't be long now. So we're getting very, very close here.